Yo, what's up? This is everyone's favorite single person solo podcast that only has one person on it, except for the time where it has multiple people on it. But this is one of the single player episodes. You've dialed in to Breaking Change FM, not to be confused with Breaking Change FM, because until you start a podcast or think about starting a podcast, you don't realize that whoever owns the FM TLD wants like $400 a year for one of those, and this is a free podcast. I don't take sponsors. I'm having to shoo them away. You know, they want to give me their money, and I'm like, no, my independence, journalistic integrity is too important. Never mind the fact that I think it's going to be our next guest on Hot Fix would probably say it's because I am brand unsafe. So, welcome to the unsafety that is Breaking Change. This is major version release 43. Congratulations. Title, The Slop Economy, because that's where we are now. Let's see, what's new in life? I talk about I-4, Interstate 4, even though I'm pretty sure it's intrastate. I think it's a Florida special. It runs from like Tampa up to like Daytona Beach, so like West Coast to East Coast, and it's the only real free highway that goes through Orlando. Although increasingly it's becoming a toll road because they're adding express lanes. So there's like effectively now the lanes where you don't move and you're just stuck in traffic and you might die, and then the lanes where you, I suppose, still might die, but pay a couple dollars to go fast. Uh, anyway, I've talked about it before. Talked about it as being one of the reasons why we bought the Tesla back in February, because the full self-driving does a better job driving it than I do most of the time, and if I'm gonna die, at least my body will be limber. You know, like if you're white knuckling something and all your joints are locked, apparently that's bad for you in the event of a collision. They say that the drunk driver often survives because they're just so laid back and relaxed. So, you know, that's a highway that's near me, and I thought I'd just mention it because somebody did a YouTube recently. Did one of them YouTube videos, and they actually analyze the highway, and they show you like what it's like to drive on it, and they explain some of the shittiness that is I-4. So you can role play what it's like to live here, especially if you've never been to Disney World and experienced it firsthand. Speaking of the Tesla, I was at the doctor's office, and coming out of the doctor's, it was raining while I was in there. And Elon, dear leader, he made a bold proclamation a couple years ago after having previously outfitted radar and other kind of additional sensor packs to previous models of Teslas, that they were going all in on just cameras and deep learning around cameras. And everyone was like, are you sure this is actually better, or it's not just like a cost-cutting thing and some sort of, motivated reasoning? Or are you just being dumb? Because 9 cameras is not the same as having, like, all kinds of additional sensors. Like, humans have additional sensors. We just don't necessarily give them a lot of credit. You could say we only have 2 eyeballs. But, we have hearing. We have our head on a swivel, not just like fixed points. Our eyeballs are actually like way better at detecting things than cameras are typically. Where I don't think we've reached quite optical quality yet in camera technology. So it's a little bit arrogant to think that cameras are enough. And one thing about cameras that sucks is that they can get wet. And if they get rained on or snowed on, they can get schmutzy. That's the industry jargon term. So you got schmutz on your lens. Now you can't see anything. And that all those vision learned, patterns of what's in front of you in the roadway, those start to break down pretty quickly when a huge portion of the camera is obscured. And what the Tesla's supposed to do in this case is say, hey, you're operating on a degraded version of self-driving. Maybe self-driving is not available. But what it seems to actually do is just give it a shot. It's like silently, without warning the driver at all, just being like, let's see how this goes. And so I was exiting the parking lot of my doctor's office, knowing that it had been kind of misting light rain for the last couple hours. And Pulls out of the parking lot. I engage self-driving. It drives into like the left turn lane. It's about to enter the intersection, and then all of a sudden, anti-lock brakes go off, which is weird. It's not like, it's dry road. There wasn't a reason to brake. And then the whole thing starts blaring an alarm saying that the car can't be driven, can't be changed to drive mode, and then also to pull over to the side of the road, which, I mean, you just stopped, and now you're telling me I can't drive, and also to pull over. So really great, UX there. And you can't stop the audio from screeching at you either. So then what are you going to do? Like, I'll admit it was a moment of deep shame for me because I realized I don't know how to drive my own fucking vehicle, and I definitely don't know what to do when it crashes. Not, collides, but rather the software dies. So there's a software crash. You check ChatGPT. Like, I mean, if I'm already handing my life to shitty LLMs and deep learning, may as well just go all in. So I asked ChatGPT what to do. And ChatGPT says, "Hey, first step is you push down both of the little rolly analog wheels on the steering wheel for a certain amount of time, and that'll restart the tablet. So that restarts the tablet, and then the blaring immediately resumes. I fortunately, a certain number of things on the car have to be dumb and the old way, like so the hazard lights is a real button, and I press the real button." And other cars are whizzing by me, and it's, uncomfortable. I get a couple of people honking at me, and I'm just like, man, fortunately, I'm not literally in the intersection, but I could have been. So then, anyway, I learned step 2 is you have to go and power off the whole vehicle. So you go to fortunately, once the tablet's reset, it actually worked, and I could go to security or whatever, or safety, scroll down, power off, and they say, don't touch anything. Because if you touch anything, it's going to be like, I don't know if you ever had a Nintendo 64 controller, but if you booted up the console while you're pressing the analog stick in any direction, it would reset the set point of what center was for the analog stick to that location. So whenever I was playing multiplayer GoldenEye or whatever, I'd always have some dipshit friend who'd be like, jack it to the left, and then I'd boot up and be like, all right, well, your controller doesn't work, and now we got to reset the game because you're a fucking dummy. So it's like, don't touch any of the windows, don't touch the steering wheel, don't touch the anything, just leave it be for 3 to 5 minutes, and then to start it up, you pump the brake, because everyone knows that brake means go. So then the car starts up again, no longer blaring at me. I can drive it like normal, and then I proceed to drive the car like a normal car to get home. But it was a little scary, Fortunately, it was happening at 5 miles an hour that it came to a sudden stop, and one assumes that the schmutz on the lens saw a blur combined with a bird combined with a shadow and assumed a collision was imminent, and so it just kind of went into imagining turtle pulling it, retracting its neck and hiding in its shell really quickly, and then if it had been in a crash, it would be good that it doesn't want to drive away right away, but it's that could have happened on the highway, and on that I-4, most dangerous road in America, which I will share the YouTubes. Yeah, that would have been bad. So, still convinced this thing's gonna kill me. But between now and then, I'm not terrified of driving in the city anymore, and my stress level's lower. Speaking of, even though I'm on camera, I just got a low heart rate notification. Been getting more of those lately, because I'm just so chill and definitely don't have some sort of heart condition. We're going to look into that. Other stuff going on. Because we live in a theme park, every now and then there's new shit to do. So there's this new bar at Magic Kingdom. Walt famously was like, hey, I don't want this theme park to be like other carnivals and shit, where it's just a whole bunch of drunk buffoons. This is for families. And so Disney, seeking quarter over quarter increases in revenue for its theme parks division, has to find ways to sneak alcohol into the parks without looking like they're betraying Walt Disney's vision of an alcohol-free utopia. Even though, the man, he drank, but he just didn't want it in the park's kind of brand image and stuff because they wanted it to be a family place. But, almost all of the Disney parks now are very sloshy. Epcot has become famous for the drink around the world shenanigans, and that's a place where I would not take a child after 6 p.m. most days. Uh, this new place called Beak and the Barrel, which I guess is maybe it's a reference. Everything seems like it's a reference to something I don't fucking know because everything's catering to Disney adults. But it's a Pirates of the Caribbean, not Pirates of the Caribbean, but Pirates of the Caribbean. We say Caribbean when we're talking about the ride with the boat and the Johnny Depp. It's next door to that. So they built a bar into that building. And it's kind of, it's very kitschy. It's cute. It's well themed. They got some pre-batched cocktails. They're some are quite strong, so they're at least effective. So if you're a dad and you're dragging your family around Magic Kingdom all day and you just need a break, it would do the job pretty well. There's not really any options for kids. It's not explicitly 21 and up. They did do their first 21 and up bar at Epcot called Geo 82. It's actually inside the golf ball, and that place is all right. The best part about it is that kids aren't allowed. Here, kids are allowed, but they've done absolutely nothing to cater to them. One would have assumed that they'd at least have something like called grog that was like a butterbeer equivalent, like, just get some butterscotch flavored foam topping on top of a cream soda, charge $12 for it, make a killing. But nope, they're all in on just liquor and, kind of weird side dishes. I ordered the octopus ceviche, which was actually pretty good, except for it was kind of in a rich cream sauce, which is all this stuff. The foods that they serve at these parks, combined with how hot and sunny it is outside, are a mystery to me sometimes. Food and Wine at Epcot is starting up, and everything is just like an extremely savory, beefy, melty mess. So watch where you step. What else is new? Oh, do I recommend the Beacon Barrel? Sure. You probably need a reservation. It only limits you to 2 drinks per seating. More than 2 drinks there. If you're not feeling it after 2 of those drinks, then you've got a problem that isn't necessarily theme park related. Other news. So a lot of nerds listen to this podcast. Hello. And a lot of you have been telling me to switch to fast mail for a long time. And I don't know why I didn't. I think I just felt like I couldn't trust it because I'd heard so many things about like deliverability of mail being a hard problem and the DNS stuff. And I was just like struggling to conceptualize how I would migrate successfully without the losing my Gmail address, because I've got a really juicy Gmail address from the beta in 2004 that's really nice. But ultimately, now that I'm using my searles.co domain more and more, and because I had that whole domain hooked up to iCloud Mail, so iCloud Plus, so if you're a paying iCloud subscriber, you can attach your domain name to your email service. So I was actually receiving all my email at searles.co via iCloud. And I've always heard that Apple's iCloud mail system is not fantastic in terms of deliverability, and it is not. In fact, it just goes down sometimes, and there's like entire half-an-hour stretches where just like no email goes through, so hope no one emailed you then kind of problems. Additionally, the search is garbage. The web UI has some filtering and rules that you can set, but really it's not fantastic. It's not for power users. But the thing that really kills setting up iCloud as your custom domain host is that the junk mail filtering story is absolute trash. In fact, a lot of you have written into the show and you've wound up in my junk filter, and I've never read your emails. So if that's ever happened, I'm really sorry, but hey, I fixed the problem because I've moved to Fastmail. Fastmail is now attached to this domain, all my other domains. I paid for I decided I was like going to really rip off the Band-Aid, so I actually paid for the 3-year family plan right out the gate. It's a lot of trust. And so I'm going to get my brother and Becky on it too over the next few weeks once the dust settles. Additionally, I've got, my Gmail forwarding everything now to that. So I've got a single unified inbox, just one inbox, no more juggling stuff. I'm going to start trying to, I don't know how you do this, like coax people into using the new email address that I own. I don't know how successful that's going to be. I was thinking like maybe just write a text expander that like in the footer I can append, hey, by the way, I'm switching emails if you want to update your contact information. Uh, I'm also interested in switching over a lot of my account signups. I've got, you look in 1Password, you got 1,400 logins. They're all tied to the Gmail address, and that's fine. It's not going anywhere. But as I'm not quite neckbeard, but I haven't shaved in a few days, and I feel like just it's sort of like that old, nostalgic view that maybe your parents or grandparents had, like it's good to own land. I feel like it's good to own your own domain. Just feels safer, even though the truth is that no one owns anything in this world. You don't own your land because if you don't pay property taxes, somebody takes it away, and you don't own your domain because if you stop paying the registration fees, somebody takes it away. So, yeah, Fastmail's good. I'll share my referral code in the show notes if you don't have it already. If you're interested in signing up, and then we'll both get some 10% spiff or something like that. But I strongly recommend it. In fact, the biggest thing I noticed is that on iOS devices, if you're using Mail app, IMAP is actually really fast. Whereas if you've been using Gmail with the Mail app, it is very slow. The search is also much better with Fastmail via the Mail app. So like whatever the API is on there. And so, I mean, they call it Fastmail, so I shouldn't have been shocked that it's fast. But I genuinely pretty blown away. So kudos to Fastmail for not sponsoring this podcast. Let's follow up on what's been going on and stuff we've either been talking about or shit I've been blogging about, and just kind of do a quick recap. How about it? I mentioned I was able to get Becky to start watching the Star Wars. She's now seen the original trilogy, Phantom Menace, and Attack of the Clones, and then she was, as well as Rogue One and Andor. She was willing to kind of go every single night. We're just going to go on to the next one, but then we lost steam at some point. Phantom Menace a little bit, and then after Attack of the Clones, she asked for a break. So I'm not sure if we're going to get back to it. But I put up a post called the Gilroy Order as a reference to the Machete Order, telling people to watch Andor first and then get in. And the guy who wrote the Machete Order post 14 years ago, he actually follows me on Blue Sky, and he read it and he endorsed it. So check out the Gilroy Order if you've got a loved one. I may have mentioned that last week. I probably did. It's been a slow couple weeks. Descript is the video editing cloud AI thing that I use to publish this podcast. I've been struggling with it all year because it stopped working, and that was one of the things I most relied on it to do. The reason I like it is from a workflow perspective. I can make edits just by editing the transcript instead of fucking around with the timeline. But specifically for the full length version of this podcast, is once the video is in it, I can slice and dice it into as many compositions as I want, and I don't have to re-upload anything, and I can just one click to YouTube, which is really nice when it works. And it just now started working again, so I'm reinvesting in figuring out how to get the most of that subscription. And they bought a company called Squadcast. And Squadcast is a multiplayer podcast, kind of like a Riverside, if you've heard of that, where you're recording a podcast and you want everyone's video and audio at a reasonably high local recording quality, and then for that to be uploaded via, your browser's local storage, kind of continuously uploading to the service. So we recorded 42.0.1 with Scott Warner via Squadcast. Audio came out okay. It was only I think 16-bit maybe or something, 16-bit lossless audio as opposed to 24 or higher. But it was, no one was peaking really too much, so it was all right. It sounded okay. Yeah, I was hoping to actually record that this video with Squadcast, just one person, because then the workflow is literally cloud recording goes to Descript, goes to YouTube, and then me with my 30 megabits per second of paltry upload speed. Thank you very much, Spectrum, who is also not a sponsor of this podcast. I'm never in the situation that I'm actually in every 2 weeks where I'm trying to upload a 36 gigabyte file to either Descript, or then when its YouTube thing fails, back down again and then up again to YouTube. So I cannot fucking wait for having symmetrical gigabit internet speeds here, and I'm not hopeful that it's going to be anytime soon. The crazy thing about it, I don't know if I've talked about this, but I've got actually fiber to the house. So we've got fiber to the side of my house, and then Spectrum, because their entire network relies on that DOCSIS coax cable technology for no other reason but that. There's like a jumper box that converts the real fiber line to coax, and then the coax runs into my house. And so it's just a normal fucking cable modem in my patch box. And yeah, they've got an exclusive deal with this kind of corner of my neighborhood. Although they claim not to, when I talk to CenturyLink, they're like, yeah, sorry, we weren't allowed to lay down cable there. So sins of the past, sins of our fathers. Anyway, if you've got loved ones at home, if you've got gigabit upstream, hold it close, write that down in your gratitude journal this morning, because it really fucking sucks to want to be a YouTuber and only have 30 megabits per second of upstream. It's not a good time. I don't like to talk about it. I'm getting agitated right now just thinking about it. So we should probably move on. Wrote another blog post about my personalization settings for ChatGPT, how I go out of my way to make it doubt itself because I want it to think more like me and not be so fucking self-confident. And it becomes, like me, a overly apologizing, self-effacing, too much self-deprecation, really silly language sometimes. But I also see that it tends to catch itself halfway through the message and then course correct, towards the end of the message. So I'm finding that when something's a lock, stock, and barrel, there is a correct answer to the question. That's what I get. So my confidence that it actually is the answer is higher. And for anything else, it's all right, let's red team this. These are the assumptions I made, and they're probably good. Or hey, this extra citation I found tells me maybe I'm wrong here. Yeah, that got some traction on the old Hacker News, where people told me that I was dumb and that I was using it wrong, which is always welcome. I mean, if anything, that's on brand for what I'm talking about here. It's good not to be too confident, because all of this changes constantly. So whatever was a good setting for ChatGPT 6 months ago is probably a terrible one now. Also read a blog post about why I think I called it why I wasn't cut out for management. Just to try to discuss a little bit, hey, as an individual contributor, I've got this special sauce that actually is related to I'm incredibly self-critical, self-critique, negative self-talk, all those things that they could be really bad and unhealthy and maladaptive, but if you've got them, you may as well use them for some good benefit. And so that's what I've tried to do, is nothing that I do ever feels like it's good enough or that it could always be better. And so I try to constantly reframe and just always be striving. And the way that I do that is by looking at what I build through an extremely critical lens. And that's my entire mental model approach. So as a coach, as a senior developer, as a boss, when somebody else, when their work isn't good enough, and no work ever is because it could always be better, and I'm not saying to be a perfectionist. I'm saying within some time constraint, okay, you got a week to build this. Let's build it as well as we can. And I think that in a week we could have done better than this. So here's how we could do better, right? So if you'll grant that there's always a better way to do something, I think most people can't handle the degree of specificity, the attention to detail, and the minutia that I tend to bring to the table. And I can't turn it off. So I can if I glance at your code, I'm going to see 30 things that I would want to discuss about maybe potentially changing or improving. You will be overwhelmed after number 5. And the best that I've ever been able to do is just suppress how I really feel. Because it's all tied up in emotion, right? You get worked up. I get not to say sweaty palms. I don't lose control. I don't literally turn into the Hulk. But I'm looking at this stuff and I'm there's some very clear issues here. And for the sake of your growth and development, I could just prioritize the top couple of things, positively reinforce and, redirect as appropriate as a manager, so that you don't turn into a bucket of goo, or you don't quit, or you don't, flame out, and so that your growth is preserved. But at the end of the day, I don't care about a person's growth because I don't care about my growth. I just care about doing great shit. That's all I want. It's like how could I possibly do better? And in a management context, I was able to sand it down a little bit, but after a certain point, it's like, what differentiates me in manager land? Nothing. Like now I'm just kind of worse at this than everyone else who wants to be doing this. And my special sauce, my differentiator is this incredibly, this watchmaker like level of attention to all these little tiny bits and bobs. And that's not a particularly useful trait when you're trying to make sure that the trains are running on time and you're trying to make sure that the people, charged with conducting those trains feel good about themselves. I have met, I didn't mention this in the post, but I've worked with a couple of people who are just absolute sociopaths, and they absolutely they would soak up every single bit of critical feedback that I could possibly muster, to the point where I would get tuckered out just pointing out their work's flaws. And those people had their own issues, but it's something that's, I think, relatively under-discussed generally, is how really great practitioners moving into management, something is lost, right? Like, you can train them not to be quite so detail-oriented or quite so exacting. You can train them to be good coaches and to prioritize the individual and the macro goals. But this holistic sense of, like, we all are operating under constraints. We should have cognizance of the broader extrinsic constraints that matter, like a real deadline or the company only having a certain amount of money. And only with that full knowledge of those constraints, then we need to decide what is the best work that could be done and shoot for that. And when we fall short of it, ask why. And that is apparently very difficult to pull off in the best of times, but even more so when not everyone is necessarily bought into wanting to do the absolute best possible work and not necessarily comfortable with having, their work scrutinized. In fact, nobody likes to be scrutinized by some other person. I don't like to be scrutinized by some other person, which means that then you just get back to square one, which is like, really the only people you should hire are people who are so driven, so motivated to do great work that they will self-audit, and they're on their own path to, continuous improvement. And it turns out that's even fucking harder to find. So all to say, I am a very happy camper as a solo developer right now, because I don't have to worry about any of that. But that's pretty much why I opted out of managing people, because every time I got close to anyone, either I had to turn off my critical thinking faculties, or they immediately realized that I was not going to give them what they wanted. The handful of times I started working closely with people, it would typically result in them having a very, very sudden 180 impression of what it's like to work with me. So that's a bummer. I want everyone to like me, but I just can't keep my fucking mouth shut. So here we are. I also talked about comments on the blog. So like, Scott asked me, hey, you don't have comments on your blog. Do you want people just to email you? And I was like, no, I want people to start fucking blogging. If I write a blog post that's interesting, you should have a blog. Everyone who's got something to say should have a website where they can post something and just write an excerpt and link to it. And this is how the blogging worked in the early 2000s. It's how I would find bloggers. I'm off the top of my head thinking of the political sphere, but in the run up to the Iraq War, I remember reading Andrew Sullivan's blog and then seeing him quote tweet Ezra Klein, and then going to Ezra Klein's blog and following that one and subscribing, and then seeing Ezra Klein, quote Matt Iglesias, and then finding Matt Iglesias, and ultimately working up my way to a curated list of maybe 18 kind of political sphere bloggers. And it was fantastic because they didn't all agree with each other. They all had really interesting takes, and there was a commentary between the different blogs because they would read each other's blogs, and then when something got spicy, they'd call it out in a sort of response post. And in the pre-timeline, pre-social media era, that for readers was a way to get exposure to different voices and build awareness and build reach in an organic way. Otherwise, you're just you're just waiting for somebody to land at your website via a search engine, or you're, I don't know, handing out business cards in bookstores telling people to read your blog and hoping not to get arrested. So that system worked great, and it's kind of gone now because everyone just moved to Twitter. I think it could come back. So if you've got a blog, let me know. I oversubscribe right now to a lot of people's individual blogs. I don't subscribe to any kind of like traditional publications in my RSS reader because I just want to see individual voices, so that I can, whenever I see anything interesting, I can boost it. Come to think of it, I've got one of those in the hopper right now that I forgot to finish last night. I'll get on it. Other follow-up, I talked a lot about Claude Code over the summer. The summer is winding down. It's September 2nd right now. Claude Code was really good over 4th of July weekend because nobody was using it. My experiences at every other point were worse. Speculation was that from 9 to 5 Eastern time especially, a lot of people were slamming Anthropic servers, and they had a secret dial in the back that would kind of reduce the amount of GPU time that every query got. Anthropic finally had to admit that, like, the thinking, quote unquote, like the cognitive, whatever I hate that we use biological terms for this shit, but like basically the service was degraded for a period of about 2 weeks, where it was just really stupid and not good at its job of writing code. And unfortunately for Anthropic, it happened to overlap with their cutover to much more stringent quota system for how like the max users can no longer kind of just consume $4,000 of tokens a day. They're time boxed, and there's different kind of like limits to how much you can use the Opus model versus the Sonnet model. And so the fact that it corresponded with that, I was having it, I don't know if it was in this period, I assume it probably was, but getting it to do even very, very basic tasks, it would just run in circles. And even before then, it was no good at Swift, at the iOS development stuff, because there's just not enough training data. And so I really had a bad time over the last few weeks with Claude, and I switched over to Codex as soon as GPT-5 came out, or shortly thereafter, because Codex is OpenAI's CLI, and they allow you to log in with your GPT Plus or Pro subscription, so that, again, it's, you might be paying $20 or $200, but that's like an upper bound on how much you're going to spend per month. If you're just using the API keys and you just use this thing all day, who the fuck knows how much you're spending? And so if you're just an individual, that's almost always a bad idea. If you're a corporation and your boss just says, hey, use it all you want. In fact, it seems like the best way to get fired is to not use all of your company's money on API tokens. If you want to show that you're really getting a lot done at work, they're looking at lines of code and how much money are they spending on the APIs. We live in a weird time. But anyway, I switched to Codex. It's much more bare bones. It's not like the stateful kind of ncurses style terminal UI. It's still in the terminal, but it's simpler. It's just kind of like a huge scroll of native terminal text, and it kind of it tends not to overwrite itself very much in the thought process. You kind of just get a whole lot of scroll back of the conversation, which is fine by me. And it doesn't support MCP quite the same way, to quite the same extent. It doesn't have hooks. It just has a very simple agents.md file, although it'll write it itself if you want, which kind of defeats the purpose. But yeah, overall, it has been night and fucking day that Codex and GPT-5 are so much better than Opus 4.1 and Sonnet 4. Or Sonnet 4. Like, it is better at Swift than anything that I've done with AI up to this date. Now, my experience with ChatGPT in the ChatGPT app, just using it as a normal LLM, is not marginally improved over the smattering of models that we had a month and a half ago. But Codex is really, really something else. You just have to know that it's only useful if you add tac search to the CLI command, as well as the typical sandbox dangerous bypass, don't, because if it does, by default it can't access the internet or the network, and except for a handful of domains. And it's got very, very onerous sandbox restrictions that prevent it from doing things like running custom scripts that might possibly hit the network. And there's just no way to overcome those sandbox inside of the session. Like, it'll ask permission for certain things, but then after a certain point, it'll just be like, oh, thanks to sandbox restrictions, I can't run your test. So I guess I'll just speculate and keep on, editing the code with no knowledge of whether it's working. So you really have to run it with the handful of correct flags to make sure that it can access the internet and that it can, ruin your life by deleting all of your family photos. Those are the two things that it needs to do, and I'm happy to let it do those. Apparently, So I have this one test bed. Basically, I've written a macro in Swift. I didn't write it, so it's not my fault. And it creates a protocol from a class. So I write a class that my code depends on. It'll generate a protocol from that class. Why is it generating the protocol? So that it can generate a fake, like a test double or a mock object that I can use in a test based on what API contract that protocol specifies. So that would normally mean like if I was doing everything by hand, I would be writing a class, and then I'd be writing a protocol, or I'd write a protocol first, and then I'd write my like real implementation against that protocol, and then I would write a fake that would be like a hand rolled mock object, which those add up over time because it's a non-trivial amount of work and bookkeeping to do to, make sure that stubbing works and all that, especially if you're like me and you've got kind of refined tastes around test doubles. So I wanted an automated solution, but the automated ones, all the dependencies out there like mockable and spyable and Swift mocking, none of them work with the latest version of the betas. They're all kind of locked to the current releases, which is not particularly helpful if like I'm trying to test drive something against the new APIs. And so I ended up having it just write me a macro that does all that for me. And Claude got something kind of sort of working, but it was a huge fucking mess. It was like 1,500 lines, and every time like I would find something wrong with it, it would go in and break new things while trying to fix other things. Like, it couldn't handle, granted, a smaller context window, but like it really, really struggled. And it was like, even I, not knowing the language, would look at its diffs and be like, you are clearly not doing this right. This is a kludge. And now with, ever since switching to Codex, that thing not only does exactly what I ask, it does it super fucking fast. It almost always works. It thinks to write the test. It always runs the tests. I don't have to have some sort of hook constraining it. And it's not perfect. Like, there are times when it's been a little off base, but like, I can always roll back, not inside the thing, but I'm using Git to commit and move on. And additionally, I asked it, hey, like, this was kind of a mess. Do you want to come up with a refactor plan? It came up with like a 10-step plan, and then it just did it one step at a time in a very iterative way. And each step had a green passing test suite. So you could move forward through history now in all 10 steps of this refactor. And you look at it now and it's like, maybe I pull this thing out into a real library, right? So very, very different experience. If you go onto one thing, okay, so there's not a lot that I like about the AI bros right now. Like, there's a lot of hype, a lot of hucksterism, a lot of grift going on. But one thing I appreciate is how disloyal they are. They're very results oriented. If your model or your subscription stops providing the value that it did recently, they will light you the fuck up. There is no loyalty for the people using Claude Code 2 months ago today, right? And so the idea that a company like Anthropic, under the old terms of network effect and how a lot of the different kind of major players in tech came to be this way, was they were first mover advantage, and so they'd get the adoption and then they'd coast. And then they'd shitify and get worse, right? And that works for a social network where everyone's bought in and it becomes an important kind of cultural touchstone. But for something like this, which is a commodity tool, it's like thing that writes code, right? May as well be moving between like a Black & Decker, table saw and DeWilt, if they make them or whatever. I'm not going to pretend to know the brand names at Home Depot. But anyway, you go and look at Claude AI and Claude Code subreddits, and you see titles like, I miss the old Claude Code. Claude Code to Codex is a game changer. Claude Code is dead. Tried Codex VS extension and never looking back. Codex just blew my mind. I appreciate this. And then of course, like, comments inside of this are like, hey, this is the Claude subreddit, and I'm still pretty happy about this, but like it bums me out that all of the posts are about how my thing sucks compared to the other thing, and everyone's like, why? Go try the other thing. Use all the tools. Like, whatever gets you the best outcome, which is like a strangely enlightened position to have, when normally I expect everything to play out the same way that like the Sega Genesis versus Super Nintendo played out in the schoolyard, where it's like some families, because they bought one of them, they bought the Nintendo. Those kids only had the Nintendo, so they were like Nintendo fans. And then the other ones, their families bought a Genesis, and so they became Genesis fans. And you meet up at recess and be like, no, Genesis is better, or whatever. And stupid fights, console wars, right? Like, don't matter. Like, the right answer is buy both of them and be wealthy. But if you can't do that, like, I get it, right? It's a natural thing for people to kind of have this sort of tribal, want to defend, whatever is theirs, whatever. This doesn't have that effect, because I don't gain anything by convincing you to use Claude Code, right? Like, even theoretically in the schoolyard, if I did my part and convinced all the other kids to switch to my console, that would marginally increase sales, and maybe I would get extra space at the Blockbuster Video for rentals of my console versus that one, which was actually a thing that could have happened, because that's how Toys R Us and them dedicated shelf space on a store-by-store basis. Here, I don't fucking care what tool you use. I just care that you get good work done. And right now, Codex and GPT-5 are pretty fucking impressive. You got to be creative about how you use it, because it's not exactly batteries included. For example, Claude auto updates the CLI. Codex doesn't. So if you install via Homebrew, for example, you need to be remembering every morning to brew update and brew upgrade Codex, because they're also updating the CLI on an almost daily basis. So anyway, that's the that's the state of things AI-wise. I'm still not very far in my app, because I am iterating on fundamental tooling. Apparently, I can't actually get started until I have a mocking library under my belt, which is extremely on brand and absolutely frustrating, but here we are. Yeah, that about does us for follow-up, which means you are owed a pun. It is your birthright. It is what we do in the middle of the show. We read a pun from Aaron, and I realize that, oh fuck, it's here, it's in this note, but there's a scroll position error bug in macOS, and it won't let me scroll to the bottom of the note, so I can't see it. So what I have to do is I double click the note, open the note in a new window, scroll down that new window, and this one lets me scroll, so that I can read the pun, because I don't read them until this is the first time I'm reading it too. So I don't know what I would have done if I couldn't have read the note. I might have paused this recording and then go and got my phone. Yeah, that's probably what I would have done. Okay. Are you ready? Get ready. I'm going to take a sip of coffee while I get ready. All right, I'm ready. Aaron says, I really didn't get the hype behind mechanical keyboards until I tried one, and then it clicked. He did warn me I'd hate this one. I really didn't get the hype behind mechanical keyboards until I tried one, and then it clicked. I want to say this is the second pun where the twist is the verb clicked this year. And if that's the case, you lose points, right? Like in Tony Hawk, if you do the same trick multiple times in a row, you earn fewer points each subsequent time, because it's like, all right, yeah, we see that you can do a 720, but if all you do is 720s all day, then that is a less impressive run. You got to have some variety. Let's see. Yeah, in fact, he did use this in version 39. I bought a new camera and I'm having a hard time learning how to use it. No matter what I do, it just doesn't click. Okay. That's a data point. I really didn't get the hype behind mechanical keyboards until I tried one, and then it clicked. At least better than the camera one. Also, Aaron is a devout user of mechanical keyboards. One assumes when I asked for a pun, he looked down at his hands and thought, what do I have here? And the answer was a mechanical keyboard. Right about what you know. Let's see. We'll bisect it again. So we got 15 so far in season 2. We'll look at 7. The problem with insurance company ads is all of their bold claims. I like that more just because insurance to claim is a more interesting turn of phrase or double use of the word claim. I won't quite bisect. I'll go to like the current number 11. Thinking of starting a YouTube channel for physicists and calling it Mass Media. I think I've decided the reason I don't love that one is because Mass Media would be a weird channel name. If it would have been like a good channel name, then that would be just great, right? But if I was actually a physicist and I had that thought, I wouldn't actually use that name because it's not actually that funny. So now I think we're dialed in because the only one in between those two, I feel like AI coding assistants are just token developers. Okay, that one actually has grown on me. I gave it a hard time because I don't think that you use the phrase token developer typically. And you don't. That is true. We're gonna call this the new. Well, hold on. I said between the two. I meant between. 7 was bold claims. 11's YouTube. I know it's really fun hearing somebody talk through a list. That's what we're all here for. It's that the camera one was the current number 9. This is better than the camera one. So that means that maybe it's the new number 9. Number 8 is currently. It took me a while to figure out how to get my boat to float, but then I let it sink in. There's a lot of this season's puns are about getting a concept in the second half of the sentence. Being in a state of unknowingness or confusion or whatever. But still, that one's better. All right. This is the new number 9, supplanting the other click-related pun. I really didn't get the hype behind mechanical keyboards until I tried one, and then it really clicked. We're going to see if I can successfully copy and paste a string of text. The new number 9. Done. Signed. Sealed. Delivered. Let's get ready for some news. We're going to talk about news now in the news section. Let's kick things off with the fruit company in Cupertino. That's what some Apple engineers jokingly refer to as their employer, especially when they're making a point to not be speaking on behalf of Apple. Just a few bits, nothing too interesting. Xcode, the app. If you're not a programmer, it's the app that developers use to make Apple platform applications. Xcode's been in beta all summer. It's the first one that includes like a Copilot-like experience where the IDE has what was previously an unlabeled GPT model that was probably 4.1. It has been updated in the latest version of the beta to include 5, GPT-5, and you can actually model select between just regular 5 and thinking. And also you can log in with your Claude account, so you can use a Claude subscription plan as opposed to the Claude API tokens only. And additionally, you can specify your own URL and bring your own model. So if you want to use like a locally hosted model or a corporate instance, you can do that too. I want to give credit where credit's due. Like the built-in little sidebar in Xcode is actually pretty good. It's as these things go, the UX is decent. You know, there's some ergonomic stuff, like you can't export the chats and stuff, and it's not like an advanced tool compared to, at this point, Copilot or especially Cursor. But it writes code in line. It's got like some nice little effects as it does it. It is by and large passable as one of those, which is far beyond my very low expectations that they'd actually ship anything at all that could write code into the editor. I thought it might just be a chat widget. However, it is clear, and this is just one instance of many, that the AI world moves so fucking fast that annual release cycles, which is what Apple has pegged everything to for quite a long time now, is too slow of a feedback loop. I don't think that constitutionally the quality of software at Apple and the processes that they use to build software are up to snuff for anything approaching the kind of we deploy to prod multiple times a day kind of shenanigans that us, you know, web programmers have been used to in the GitHub era of just keep on merging stuff into the main branch, and then as things hit the main branch, they just kind of auto deploy to the next environment and so on and so forth. And we mostly deal with it in prod, where from an operational perspective, we dynamically will be able to roll things back and undo stuff if anything breaks. You know, Apple's never going to have that luxury, but yearly releases are just too fucking slow, because it means like anything that they didn't nail this time, there will be point releases where they put out new features, and there's certainly patch releases where they fix bugs, but the name of the game is not going to really change for the next year. And already it's so far behind that I'm just resigned to having a terminal running GPT-5 same fucking model codex, because it has agent-like semi-autonomous and autonomous workflow capability, whereas the thing in Xcode doesn't. Now, that being said, the thing in Xcode is really nice, especially if you're just asking questions and seeking to understand, or if you've got a particularly drudgery-induced task, like having to reformat a bunch of stuff, you could ask it to do it for you. But in general, like that they released inside of the beta cycle, especially so close to the Gold Master, which is a term that we use for release candidates. We're so close to new iPhone day, and when they lock in all of these operating system versions, it was kind of shocking to see that Apple actually updated the models and updated that backend so quickly. We saw every other service in the world also very quickly update to GPT-5, but that Apple did it was notable. So I want to, call that out. It was pretty neat to be able to download Xcode and then suddenly get not only the latest and greatest GPT model, and whether it is great is debatable, but it is definitely late, but also to get the Claude support in there. And granted, Claude's been pretty worthless lately, but it's nice to have options, so that when one of them sucks, you can be like, I don't want to use that model, I want to use the good one. And then, because the grass is always greener. Other Apple news, Jay Blahnik, who's a name you do not know unless you watch these keynote videos very closely. He's the man who's got the creepy, really, really wide open eyes and the hair and the just extremely, I don't know how to put it, trying not to use a word that might be associated with any stereotypes. Just plastered on shit-eating grin. And the way that he talks is way too fucking high energy and fitness instructor-y. He's the one who's been in charge of Apple Fitness ever since they announced that as a major initiative. Early days in the Apple Watch, in one of those keynotes, I don't know, probably close to 10 years ago now, they're like, and this is Jay Blahnik, and he's running up the fitness group. Well, it turns out the fact he kind of looks like a creepazoid, and most dudes who work as personal trainers seem to be creepazoids, in my very limited secondhand experience. Apple responds to accusations of executive creating toxic workplace. So I'll link to the Mac Rumors summation of this, but it's, again, credit where it's due. It is extremely rare for Apple to get beat up over having an executive who, there's claims of sexual harassment. I think even some I don't want to get sued for defamation here, but read the article. Clearly, dude's probably not super awesome. The fact that like Apple made it this far without any, serious allegations of abuse by their mostly male, mostly, very, very, very big power dynamics because it's such a flat organization. You got these senior VPs, and then they it's a very, very thin org chart. So you could definitely create opportunities for some power harassment. That's what they call it in Japanese. They call it sexual harassment is sekuhara, like sexual and harassment, and power harassment is pawahara, which makes sense to me. Yeah, so Jay Blahnik, like retroactively, I'm looking now, thinking back on all those videos, and like, yeah, you looked like a creep. This is not surprising at all. Maybe I should just start a consulting company where you just show me all of your leadership, and then I'm like, yeah, watch out for that one. That's the one you got to worry about. His eyes are too wide. So anyway, Jay Blahnik, I hope you get what's coming to you if you did the things that it's pretty clear you did based on what people are saying, because they have no reason to fucking say that, and it's a company where people don't say shit like that, apparently, unless they really goddamn mean it. So we'll see what happens there, as Apple surely announces that their next head of fitness is a lady. That's one way to protect, or to reduce the odds of something like that happening. Yeah. But, that's not going to cast a cloud on our sunny day, because September 9th, 7 days from today, is new iPhone day. Not the day that you get a new iPhone, but the day that Apple puts out does a keynote presentation, but not a physical stage keynote presentation, but like actually just hits play on a video that is probably already finished. And then we watch that video as if it's happening live, because it is happening live, because a whole bunch of media from around the world are going to fly to the Steve Jobs Theater, and they're going to watch the video live concurrently with the stream. And if all of this sounds like a lot of bullshit ceremony for what is just a product announcement that could have been, of mostly iterative releases that could have just been a press release, you'd be right. But there is a certain pomp and circumstance to the most successful, most profitable consumer electronic device in history, maybe the most successful product in history. When you think of the scale of the iPhone, there's the iPhone, then there's pretty much every other product ever, and in Apple land, I think we often will think about it in terms of, well, I watched the WWDC video, I watched the iPhone video, these are about on par with each other, but like the amount of attention and press that the iPhone event in particular generates is so fucking much that it's way beyond the point of being for us. So if you're enough of a nerd to be listening to this podcast, the iPhone event isn't for you. It's really for the media, and it's for setting the table for what's the conversation, what's the frame that Apple wants the media to have about this device, or family of devices. And, the preview tagline, they always give one that doesn't really give anything away, but people speculate anyway, is called Awe Dropping, which I assume is a reference to jaw dropping, which I assume is probably a nod to the fact that among the new phones is the iPhone 17 Air. We assume it's going to be called the Air because that would be the logical thing to name it. So I can't wait for them to call it something else. Yeah, I'm looking at the headlines of what's expected of this thing. It's all pretty predictable. The iPhone 17 Air, one assumes it's going to be called, is going to be, in terms of screen size, in between the Pro and the Pro Max. So not quite as big as the Pro Max. I think 6.6 inch OLED instead of whatever the Pro Max is probably 6.9. Available in sky blue, which will probably kind of closely match the new MacBook Air's sky blue color. The whole lineup, including the base 17, will be getting what Apple calls ProMotion. So that means the whole lineup is now finally moving to 120 hertz refresh rates, which is really nice, especially for like, as the operating system has moved into being so animation heavy. iOS has always had a lot of animations going on, but the liquid glass in particular, I have to imagine, like, I'm not a frame rate snob, but at 60 frames per second, sorry, I try to talk good because this is a talk show. At 60 frames per second, I strongly suspect, I don't have any 60 frames per second devices running the new beta, but I strongly suspect that the liquid glass animations are not quite as remarkable as they are in ProMotion with 120 hertz refresh rates, because those really do come alive. The dynamic island is another example where I'm sure that at 60 hertz doesn't really look quite as nice up at the top of the screen. So the whole thing is going to be moving on to 120 hertz across the board, which is a nice baseline. This is supposedly the year that the two Pro phones get a vapor chamber cooling solution, and that's one that it's basically, I don't know, best analogy I can think of or had described to me was, imagine you've got an ice pack that's just like solid at like room temperature. So it's like just with like a higher freeze point, right? So you've got like an ice pack. It's a sealed enclosed unit, and then as it gets hot, the stuff inside of that ice pack turns to vapor, and then it moves, and it's just a way to scooch the heat away from the chip up to other parts of the cavity of the vapor chamber. And then as it cools down again, it condenses again, and then it's a way to transfer the heat away from the chip. So that might be useful, just because if you use either the Pro or the Pro Max phone, you've probably noticed how hot these latest chips, they're much more power hungry. Their TDP is, I don't know how many multiples higher than the early iPhones. So it's a small miracle that like they're able to ship these things as they currently exist and not literally burn your hands just from use. So having a cooling solution for the Pro and the Pro Max is always welcome. The back of the phones, the design is likely to be different. Not just like the camera bump is going to move to the Google style camera Mesa, formulation, where instead of just having like a little like plateau over there, it's going to be a bar across the whole thing. Part of the reason why it would be a bar is they're moving the front facing camera from a 12 megapixel. I want to say a 12 megapixel camera to a 24 megapixel camera. So much better front facing camera. So many people take selfies, and the selfies always look just absolutely like shit. Well, a 24 megapixel camera that has a better lens might require more depth, and so that would be one reason to have the bar behind it, because the whole Face ID assembly and all that will be a little bit thicker. So yeah, these are kind of dink and dunk changes, right? So if you're using a Pro phone right now, what really changes? You get a slightly faster processor because it's an A19 Pro instead of an A18 Pro. You get slightly faster charging. You get the better selfie camera, but if you're a Pro phone user, you might be smart enough to not really use the selfie camera that much. Rumors that they're going to finally roll out 8K film, so being able to take videos in 8K, which has been possible from a lens perspective for a while and from a sensor perspective, but they just have never enabled in software. Presumably because, among other things, takes a ton of bandwidth on the SSD. The entire image processing pipeline has to be able to handle frames that large at that speed of, let's assume that they cap it at 60 frames a second, maybe even 30 frames a second. And additionally, the heat generated from even just recording 4K for more than a couple minutes is such that I wonder whether or not that wasn't a concern too. So having 8K video recording would be really nice for all of our 8K screens that we have everywhere. But if you're like me, like, why not? Why not? Like future me will never regret having higher quality video and photos, because future me will have higher expectations for what looks good. And when I look back now, in any camera that I took a picture of 3 years ago, any phone for 5 years ago, like, it looks so much worse than it could. And I'm always thinking about, hey, the marginal cost if I sell my phone this year for 70% of what I bought it for, and then I buy a new one. I just keep rolling forward so I can always be on the latest cameras. Then at least I'm always taking the best pictures I can. Now, concurrent with that, though, is that now that I'm 40 and I keep looking worse and my skin gets craggier and wrinklier, suddenly kind of interested in the potato cams again. I'm like, hey, if I take some lower quality photos and videos of myself, I'll feel better about how I look. And then AI can just sort of up-res me and reduce all of the smudges and smooth them out for me. Wi-Fi 7. Yeah, I'm just like listing off things that these things are likely to have. It's probably going to look, apart from the different look in the back and having, a mixture of glass and aluminum with kind of like an aluminum round rect in the back and moving the Apple logo and the placement of the Qi magnets. I don't know, man. Like all three of these, the traditional phones of the iPhone 17, the Pro Max, probably if you're using the 16s, unless you're like me and you're a sicko on the upgrade plan, or you just always have to have the latest and greatest, probably not a lot to get all that sexually aroused by. But for anyone who's been wanting something new, I frequently complain about how heavy these phones are. And I really, really like, in theory, I've got the 13-inch iPad Pro, and it's very thin, and I like thin. It is relatively light, but it's still a 13-inch fucking iPad. And so holding it up like a newspaper is something I'm only going to do every couple days. The idea of having a substantially lighter phone with still a pretty spacious screen, even if I'm sacrificing the camera, and that's the rub, right? Like, sure, it's going to have the A19 instead of the A19 Pro. It's not going to have as fast of a processor, but that also means, like, I don't know, man, like, probably won't get quite as hot, one hopes. It's going to have limited battery, and that's fine. Is it fine? I don't know. This is going to be a tough one for a lot of people. I think they're going to oscillate between, especially if you usually get the Pro phone every year, you're going to be looking at that Air and being like, yeah, I'm in the mood for something different. So we'll see how they position it. One suspects that the Air is probably going to come in just below $1,000 and sort of create space in the lineup for the Pro. The Air being like $950, and the Pro probably breach $999 into the $1,000 50 or $1099 category for the first time. And Apple will very deftly not use the word tariffs. Watch Series 11, not a single rumor about it being better, that as far as I can tell. It's probably going to be a Series 10, and they're going to have to concoct a story as to why it's better. Better motion detecting in there or something, and they'll have the lady doctor come in and talk about ovulation for a minute, or women's health for what seems like the third or fourth year in a row, as they really, really struggle to come up with anything new to do with the watch. They want to do all this health stuff. They don't want to have to deal with FDA clearance. There's just like, I don't know, man. Like, do anything interesting. I'm very disappointed that the watch hasn't really moved forward, but ultimately, like, the form factor matters less to me than the fact that the software still sucks so much. Like, the apps are so goddamn unreliable. Like, you've got a better processor in the watch now than the phone had when the watch released. And yet, like, the Messages app just doesn't fucking work most of the time. It will, if you're right at the border of the range of Bluetooth between your phone and your watch, which I frequently am because I check my phone at the door. Like, it just will not negotiate a Wi-Fi signal. It'll just, every message will fail to send, and you'll only find out when you look at your watch later and see all these not delivered flags. The podcast app, it can download podcasts, which is really lovely, but you try to get that thing to connect or to stream audio, and you just watch it chug and struggle because of, it's not just the hardware constraints. Like, these are very clearly apps that don't get a lot of love. I can't tell at all that any of them were really touched at all, other than, recompiling for the liquid glass in the watchOS 26 upgrade. For the first time, I'm kind of feeling like, man, I really kind of do wish that different watchmakers, different smart device makers were able to get the same kind of platform level APIs and benefits that Apple benefits from, because the watch is the only show in town, and they just haven't really done much. I hate to complain. I hate to bite the apple that feeds me with the Tim, but the watch is not exciting. So will I buy one anyway? Absolutely, because I'm an absolute fucking sucker. The Ultra 3, I'll get an upgrade. Apparently a slightly different screen, maybe higher quality. The pixel counts are a little bit different. Satellite connectivity, if you're actually the person who's going on the monster hike with only the Ultra watch, being able to send messages with satellite is interesting. Of course, in spite of having that satellite connectivity and an LTE radio and Wi-Fi, if it can detect a marginally bad Bluetooth connection to your paired iPhone, you can forget about sending any messages at all because of how that app is goddamn terrible. And thus concludes speculation about the show. Honestly, the one thing everyone should probably buy from that thing is like the AirPods Pro 3, because the AirPods Pro are undeniably one of the best products Apple's ever made. The 2 improved on a lot of the flaws in the first generation. Third generation, if it's got better microphones, I mean, I'll take better anything, but better microphones in particular would be a game changer, because the microphones are really the Achilles heel of the AirPods Pro 2. You can tell when you're on a phone with somebody or a call with somebody and they've got the AirPods microphone engaged. Over a software release, Apple claimed that there is now a studio quality microphone sound, and that is absolute horseshit. It is overprocessed garbage. One hopes, hey, if we can just get a really good AirPods Pro 3 out of this, I'll be pretty happy. I think I've decided, though, that I am going to buy the iPhone 17 Air. And I think part of it is I just want the novelty. I want to try something new. I want to have a very lightweight phone that I don't feel like is just a small brick in my pocket everywhere I go. I do feel, and I don't know why I feel this way, because 6.2 inches should be plenty, but I do want a slightly larger screen. I sometimes feel kind of cramped. Part of that might be that the OS has just become more sparse, less information dense, and the buttons and the tap targets are pretty big, and there's just like a lot of empty space now throughout the operating system, and which is exactly the same reason why like Apple couldn't sell a 11-inch MacBook Air again, because modern day macOS with Retina is so much less dense than whatever version of OS 10 was shipping in 2011, 2012, 2013. And so on very, very small screens, macOS has never been less usable. One suspects that might also be true for iPhones now that they don't sell or support really very small form factor iPhones. So yeah, the 17 Air, I think, look, man, I want something new. I want it to be light. I want it to feel different than just being like a marginal upgrade over my current phone. The problem is going backwards, right? It is a struggle to knowingly take a downgrade in camera quality, and that I would be taking worse pictures. I will be trying not to think about that too hard, I guess. That's the big thing. But otherwise, will I miss the slightly faster performance? Probably not. One thinks about the RAM, like if it were the case that, like, because I'm building an app that uses the Apple Intelligence, the foundation models. If it were the case that the A19 Pro with the extra, NLP machine learning processors, like the computer science, this is just alphabet soup. If it were the case that the CPU on the A19 Pro was like way better at the AI shit, or the amount of RAM it had allowed Apple's own built-in AI shit to perform way better, then I'd be interested. But all signs point to Apple stuck with a relatively conservative baseline for these on-device models, and there's not some they don't get more. They aren't turbocharged. They will be faster, but they're already pretty fast, and that's not really the problem. So, not really worried about the A19 versus the Pro. Yeah, I think I'm going to do the iPhone 17 Air and hold on to the 16 Pro as a test device. That's my current plan. And so if I really need a camera, I could do a quick SIM swap, or just take it as a dumb camera and take pictures with it. That's my thought. we'll see where it lands. I'm looking forward to next week's video because I'm a big dum-dum. I hope you watch it too. I was thinking about doing a live stream and talking over it, but then I was like, you know what? They play enough music on those that I wonder if I'd get a content strike. Need to look into that first. So that about does it for the Apple news. What else we got going on here? So Western democracies everywhere are passing child verification, like age verification laws for using the internet. And the UK has a online safety act that has similar rules about content and gating that content around some kind of age verification. And 4chan, because they're pieces of shit generally and host a lot of disagreeable content, has made a stand and said, hey, we're not, I think it's because they don't operate in the UK and they don't really make any money in the UK. They're just saying, hey, go fuck yourself. We're not gonna, we're under US law. You can't tell us what to do. We're gonna do what we want to do, and you can't actually fine us. So the UK is now once again pitted against the US. They're just coming off the heels of losing the battle over the Secrets Act or whatever, where Apple would have been required to, or they were required to turn off advanced data protection for iCloud users, and would have been required to hand over iCloud backups and iCloud information for anyone around the world for the UK government if that had stood. And apparently they caved to pressure from the US. We have a bilateral agreement with the UK that says like you kind of can't do that, and seeing Tulsi Gabbard in a position of prominence is very strange. But she was there, and she was like, "We're not going to let this happen." So it's just like it's a weird dynamic. It's interesting to see that 4chan's trying to drum up the same thing, because if you read their statement, it's all like, under settled principles of U.S. law, American courts will not enforce foreign penal fines or censorship codes. So they're clearly angling to get rescued by Trump. And hey, if it weren't for 4chan, there's a very good chance he would not have won in 2016. So maybe it'll work. It'll be interesting either way. I just hate it when the test case for a bad law is somebody so hateable that it might result in regulators or the courts being like, well, look at 4chan, look at all this kiddie porn and hentai stuff. Like, this is the perfect whipping boy for making the case for why this law is a good thing, and let's make an example out of them. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Ars Technica had an article titled "Americans' Junk-Filled Garages Are Hurting EV Adoption." I'll link to the article, which you probably don't need to read, to kind of just use your imagination here, because I think we all know how many like if you walk around your neighborhood and there's garages in your neighborhood, how many of them are being used to house vehicles. Like, maybe it's worse in Florida because we don't have basements here in our homes. But in my neighborhood, for example, I see a lot of EVs. I see Teslas all over the place. Maybe 2/3 of houses keep at least one of their cars in the garage. At least 1/3 always have a car out front in the driveway. Some have 2. Some have 3. They'll do like a 3rd sideways park and often block the sidewalk because they're fucking animals. But when you see somebody open their garage, you can quite often be like, yes, this garage is just an extra room, a storage facility for you. And you're not going to put a car there. And it's, if you need to charge a car every night, where are you going to do that outdoors? Of course, in multifamily homes and apartment complexes and stuff, like, no doubt, electric vehicle adoption is an uphill battle. But if you own a home and you already have a full garage and you need to buy a car, the barrier of entry to wanting to buy an EV now is like, oh, how much do I want to clear out my garage so that I can park it in the garage so that I can plug it in every night? And that might just be way too high because now you have to give something up to get the new type of car. And so anyway, it's a curious thing to think about in that like American culture of just us all being so consumerist and addicted to collecting junk and not getting rid of shit that we don't need anymore has resulted in a case where even the people who have the single family homes with the garages and the electric panel right in the fucking garage, even a huge swath of those people can't buy EVs without it being a big ordeal. In fact, in my neighborhood, I very often see, and this drives me nuts, running those like relatively high voltage 48 amp power cables from inside the garage underneath the garage door to the outdoors and then plugging them into the vehicle. So the vehicle is charging outdoors with a cable that is, one wonders, because they are really high amp, whether or not they are rated for outdoor use, especially in a state that is known to get a lot of fucking rain and wind. What could go wrong? If you want somebody to hate, there's a new book out called In Praise of the Office. It argues that hybrid schedules don't work and that return to office brings motivation and learning. It's a summary from Slashdot. You can go and look at the book. Yahoo Finance did a story on it. And it's just, if you are one of the handful of people who were doing remote work before COVID, and you did indeed see that everyone else kind of like their first experience with remote work happened to coincide with like one of the most collectively traumatic experiences of their life. Like, it's not a shock that it didn't always go great. That, you know, a lot of jobs aren't well suited for it. A lot of people weren't prepared for it and didn't go in very thoughtfully about it. And that the experience wasn't necessarily awesome. The snapback, though, to offices as being therefore better, right? It serves certain interests. One of those interests simply being like, I want to get past any sort of recollection of COVID, because in a lot of people's brains, COVID is like remote work is like masking, right? It's a reminder of this thing that really sucked that no one wants to think about or deal with anymore. So why don't we all go back to the office and just kind of go back to the before time? And I understand that impulse. It's just that my before time was also remote, so I kind of don't give a fuck. Yahoo Finance asks the author, Peter Capelli, what's wrong with a hybrid work arrangement? Capelli says, people just don't come in. That's maybe the single biggest factor. There is a growing awareness that people are never really going there, are really never there on their anchor days. If you want that for your company, you have to manage that attendance. What's the compelling advantage of in-person work? Yahoo Finance asks Capelli. There's value in human interaction, what we learn from each other, the cooperation that we get from solving problems, and the motivation and commitment that comes from being around other people. When you first begin your career, imagine what it would have been like if no one was in the office. You'd be completely lost. Accepting that last sentence, the idea that extemporaneous innovation and interaction and collaboration happens at the office, and that's good and productive and helpful, is such poppycock. It's like it's a belief that is harbored by a handful of people, probably the more social people, probably the people in the middle management roles who don't really have clear and concrete output for what they do every day, probably for the executives who have even less of that and also kind of want to be able to mind that things are going along, want to see a lot of butts in chairs and hard work happening. I think it's got a lot more to do with that and a lot less to do with spontaneous, brilliant ideas occurring. Flip side, the last thing he said, that's 100% true. For people at the bottom couple of rungs of the ladder, advancement usually happens by showing up, being very present, having that productivity, having that energy be noticed. And if you're working remotely, it might be harder to get noticed. Even if you're producing a lot, you know, everything kind of just blends in together into a sea of text and Slack updates. In fact, sometimes like people who are overproductive in remote environments get bopped on the head for being, you know, clogging up Slack, right? You're sending me too many emails, right? Like it's kind of a lose-lose for beginner developers, or not just developers, but in any industry, I'm sure. And then if you don't know anything, I know somebody who was put on a PIP because he asked too many questions at work. He's a brand new employee and he's just asking how to do stuff. And they're like, you're holding the team back too much, and there's too many. And then of course, when everything's remote, there's a paper trail for everything. So his manager's like, and here you asked how to do this, and here you asked for advice on this, and here you asked for feedback. How dare you? It gets managed out of the company as a result. Yeah, that between that and AI, right? Remote work and the degree to which AI is replacing a lot of the drudgery tasks that we typically associate with entry level jobs, like it's indeed a bad time to be a beginner. But yeah, I still struggle. Maybe it happens. Maybe there's an in-office experience somewhere where people truly have creative and like lovely interactions every day that result in great outcomes. I've had one or two projects that were that way, where a project team was working in earnest on something over like a 3 to 6 month span. And, but it was never like the managers had almost nothing to do with that. They created the space and then we had the ownership of it and we ran with it. And if we as a team decided that we could do it remotely, and I actually come to think of it, on several of those projects, we did decide that. We're like, okay, well, let's all travel back to our homes now and work from there, and we'll use TeamViewer or whatever. And we were equally productive on that end. So I don't know. I struggle with this one. If you want a book to read to get mad at, check it out. It just sound. I mean, like I think it's from Wharton, like the Wharton Management School, Business School. I suspect that if you write a book that like executives are gonna like that agree with what the executives want, it probably sells more. So shocking news. Over in gaming news, hasn't been a lot going on. Yu Suzuki, he's the creator of Shenmue, the Shenmue franchise. Shenmue 1 being a hallmark in the early history of video games that were open worldy. It used the free system, which was an acronym that stood for fully something environment, where you could, you're a Japanese boy in the 80s and you could go in your bedroom and you could open the drawer and you pick up an orange and then move the orange with the crappy Dreamcast controller and look at it and then do no other thing with that orange. You could go to the convenience store and listen to the jingle and look at the shelves and pick up the products and then not buy those products, but just hold them and just look at them. You could do other things too. I loved that game. That game is one of the reasons I was so excited about when I heard about the opportunity to take an internship in Japan, because like it was a different world. And I had experience with that other world because of the game Shenmue. Shenmue 2 was also a great game. It took place in Hong Kong mostly, and it did not engender in me the same interest in going to China. So that bit of it was like less exciting. Shenmue 3 came, it was a Kickstarter special. So it came, 17, 18 years later. And it wasn't very good. It was not built on the bones of the Virtua Fighter engine for the combat mechanics. And combat was never a huge part of the game, but it was there. The controls kind of sucked. The cinematics were unskippable, unpausable even. I backed it. I wanted to support more of this story, but it starts in Village China, which is even more uninteresting to me. I don't know, man. It's just I don't have that. If it was Tokyo, I'd be all about it because I want to explore, like intricate cityscape environments. That's why I like the Yakuza franchise. But anyway, it was kind of a dud. Reviews were not particularly kind. A lot of people bought it, and a lot of people played the first hour of it, and then they're like, oh, all right, the magic is lost. You can't go home again. And that's kind of where it landed, I think. And now he's saying that, Xbox and Nintendo releases are coming for Shenmue 3, an enhanced version with better graphics, 4K textures, support for modern upscaling like DLSS, The number of NPCs are going to be, increased so that the villages feel like a little bit less dead, which would be nice. Uh, New camera changes, UX improvements, all of that's really great. And the idea, and this is, I assume you, Suzuki. Yeah. Suzuki says, I want Shenmue 4 to be enjoyable for newcomers. To make that possible, the most important thing is to make it enjoyable without knowing the previous events in the story. I don't think that a new player wants to know 100% of the story. 20 or 30% could be enough. Totally agree. That's generally true. If you've got a good standalone story, that should be enough. And then if there's other lore to lean on or another place for people to explore after that story, that's great. And because at this point, if you call it Shenmue 4, you're already limiting yourself to the handful of people who played the first couple Shenmue games and weren't so turned off by Shenmue 3 that they won't even consider it. But he's also, Yu Suzuki doesn't work at Sega anymore. This is a relatively small, independent, lean operation. I'm curious to see if this ever materializes. I hope it does. Maybe I will go to the enhanced edition of Shenmue 3 and give it a serious go. But there's just so many good games out there. I almost wonder, Shenmue as a point in time and as a touchstone in my particular life, because it was very influential on me, is really special. I've replayed those games recently. They're fine. They don't age particularly well. The mechanics are kind of outdated. They had their effect. Open world games are forever changed. Games where you can explore environments quite the same way and just feel like a person who lives in a town in a particular setting, timeline. There haven't been a lot of games like that. There just aren't. Role-playing games where it's just a slice of life. The closest you can get is the Persona franchise, maybe, where you're typically a student in a Japanese high school or middle school. But then half of that game is dungeon crawling turn-based combat, which isn't at all the same as, hey, every now and then you get in a fight at the arcade in Shenmue. The Yakuza franchise or Like a Dragon, which has been rebranded to, is often compared to Shenmue because it's got the similar environments. But the camera's further pulled back. It's a lot more combat, a lot more focus on just narrative story beats instead of experiencing and living in a space. So from a setting perspective, it's kind of nice, but it's not, doesn't scratch the same itch. And even a Shenmue 4, which I'm sure would probably also be based in China, correct me if I'm wrong, I didn't beat 3, so I don't know where the story ends up there. Yeah, it just doesn't... If I were to make a game, it might literally be, here's an interesting story, and you just get to exist. And there's a calendar, and you can take 3 months or 6 months or 9 months to, quote unquote, beat the story and complete all the narrative beats. But there's just a lot of shit to do, and that shit is just everyday life shit. And that would be fucking rad. Sometimes you just want to exist in a different place. See how things could be different from your everyday. And it doesn't have to involve, magic spells and zombies and supernatural bullshit and guns and combat. That's what I want from a video game. And I am increasingly convinced I will never get it because indie games and pixel art sort of scratch that itch. And that shit doesn't do much for me. I want it to be immersive. I was hoping VR would get us there, and it sure didn't. Another game, this is interesting. This is probably not a good game. This is probably not something you should play, but it's a readme that you should read and think about what this might mean for games in the future. It's called Roguelike, which is a reference to roguelike, which is a game that is like rogue, which has come to mean two big things. Run-based, meaning you play the game for a session, and when you die, when the game ends, you restart the game and you play the same game over again. It also means typically procedural generation. So that the game is different each time you do a run. There's an element of randomness. So like maybe the levels or the dungeon is organized differently for you to explore. Or the towns or the people, it's all kind of randomized. Roguelike, rag being a reference to RAG, the AI term that I can't remember, is a AI generated game where all of the dialogue is care of an LLM that is generating that dialogue. It listens to you with speech to text. So you talk into the microphone and you actually carry out the dialogue with the non-player characters in the game, and then text to speech back. So they speak at you in particular voices. And one can imagine that games that lean heavily into this will be much lower cost than paying union voice actors and writers. They will probably be mostly bad because the nature of a static LLM is like you could have conversations all day long, but like, how are you going to make sure that they tie to actual story beats and move the game forward? Like, after a certain point, you're just having random ChatGPT conversations with random vendors for what ends, right? Sure, you could say just to exist in a world, but like, part of what makes that immersive experience of being in a game convincing is you know that there's authorial intent behind it and you're not just talking in circles with a robot. That because like eventually you have a long conversation, it's going to start saying shit about the world that it's in that isn't true. And then you're going to talk to somebody else and their version of reality is not going to map at all to that. And so then you're like, I'm immersed in a world where none of the facts are actually internally consistent because I just keep talking to LLMs. And as a result, I think there's a lot of opportunity to sprinkle in these technologies to add maybe a little bit of improvisation, a little bit of range, a little bit of dynamism to maybe how we respond to, instead of the current state of we get a canned response from an NPC and then we get three choices in terms of what we say. Having the conversation be more on rails, but be open to varying paths within that conversation to feel more like to better resemble a real two-person conversation where a conversation just flows. I think that's entirely achievable. It's going to be a challenge for an industry that is already fighting tooth and nail to protect voice actors, to the gaming industry in particular is extremely reticent to, and when I say industry, I'm not talking about the executives because they would love this shit, but there's a ton of pressure by the professionals in the gaming industry against any AI related stuff because fully like 80% of the jobs right now are in art asset generation. So AI is seen as a huge threat. And the more and more stuff that can be done way, way cheaper with AI tools, it's just, there are other domains like in programming where we talk about AI is just increasing the capacity for like how much we can get done, like how much we can achieve. Like, hey, look, maybe we only thought this app could have these 3 features and now here's 300. And like all of us are, because there's an insatiable demand for more capable and robust software. In the gaming industry, a AAA game costs so much money that to make that money back, you have to sell like 20 million copies and a bunch of microtransactions and battle passes for 10 seasons of multiplayer combat. Like, it's already unsustainably expensive to produce a game that is up to the standards of production value that gamers have come to expect. And so the cost reductions gotta happen somehow. And what's the biggest cost is the people it takes to make the game. So the thing that AI can give the gaming industry is a way to reduce headcount, to bring costs in line so that it can deliver products at a scope and scale and a production value that like the market is demanding, that is sustainable. And so that's really the crux of it, is you've got the people who work in the gaming industry saying, this isn't sustainable. Like, you're making me work all this crunch. You barely pay me at all. There's hundreds and hundreds of us in this kind of sweatshop. And then we ship the game and then you close our studio because it still didn't meet your performance expectations. Well, they might get what they want, right? Is AI generated game assets that just replace them because the AI will work crunch. The AI does cost less than them and the production values are increasingly good enough. And especially when you put them inside of constraints like a game engine or like, 3D models that you look at Unreal Engine 5 and you look at the asset catalog and kind of where Epic has gone with it. And not to say that it's all moving to this paint by numbers system, but you can completely see how maybe if you haven't played it, Inzoi is a Sims-like game, a Korean game developer, where it really lives and dies on the back of AI-generated assets. So big part of the game is like you can make items for your characters or textures for those items and upholstery that is like entirely AI generated, and it runs afoul of copyright and all this other stuff. But like because it fits the mold of like the world's schema for where things are and how they're shaped and how things are constructed, it's actually pretty successful. And these tools are only going to get better. So I saw Reg like, and I started having some thoughts that it might actually be indies, independent developers, who are adept at these tools, where the industry kind of is forced to change through disruption, as opposed to a top-down, somebody at Microsoft just declares by fiat that we're going to start adopting AI tools in games. It might take a couple successful indie hits to scare the shit out of the publishers to then stimulate that change and give them cover to start adopting these tools as part of the workflow at professional game studios. So Reg-like, it might just be an interesting experiment that if enough people look at this and other similar projects in flight right now, might start to portend what we could expect when we see the first breakout hit. The Slop Economy is the title of this episode. Washington Post, people have finally realized that if you use a video-based social media feed, if you're on TikTok and you're scrolling and swiping all day, or Instagram Reels but in Facebook and their Facebook Reels, if you're watching a lot of videos, you are seeing a lot of AI-generated crap. Oh, YouTube Shorts, right? Shorts and Reels are the perfect format for where AI video is right now, because they're relatively low resolution. They're highly compressed videos typically. They're a minute or less very often. And so you don't need to have the audio is often inconsequential. So like, that everything other than VO3, most of the AI generated, like video generated tools, like they don't typically have audio. And so the fact that these videos are very often have a different vocal track or just have music over them with maybe even generated speech, it is no doubt, it is no surprise that a lot of short form video content that is all over these social media, social video apps, I don't even know what we need a better short form video apps, are just lousy with tons and tons of AI generated videos. I don't use these apps. I just don't. I don't consume this shit. I don't have room in my life for mindlessly video scrolling. I hear about it a lot. Obviously, it's moved the culture significantly. I'm kind of curious actually how many people listening to the show actually do use TikTok or Instagram Reels and spend a non-trivial amount of time consuming them. If you do, I'd love to hear a little bit about your experience, not necessarily vis-a-vis like AI videos, but just generally. You can write in podcast@searles.co. Would love to hear about it. It's this Washington Post article is and in the way that the classical media always tends to do, is like they're writing about this new thing that's happening that the kids are doing as if they're the ones discovering it. As if I'm reporting out what's happening at the front lines of TikTok.com. So anyone in these apps, surely if you know that AI video is a thing, you know that you're seeing a certain amount of it. You've probably been duped a number of times. You've probably noticed them a number of times. You've probably seen meta commentary about, hey, that video that went viral was actually like fake, and so on and so forth. The Will Smith thing that, was really strange. The Washington Post article has no new data in it. It has no facts and figures, just a lot of anecdata. A few people who, in their spare time, they make this AI slop video and kind of take a sciencey edge to it, as opposed to thinking about it in creative terms. They're just trying to goose engagement. And after a certain point, it's like, how is that different than BuzzFeed using Photoshop or using CMS with carousels or Harry Potter personality quiz generators to goose engagement in the previous era of people who were just looking for lowest common denominator shitty content. Was any of this ever art? Does it really matter? Like, I would say it does. What matters is that all of these tools, all of these platforms for the last 15 years have created this balkanized information ecosystem where everybody's definition of reality and facts and the authority of those facts and institutions that, like Washington Post, now depend on which information, island you happen to inhabit. It'll only get worse if more and more of those inputs are actually just coming from completely imagined universes, fake videos of fake news events and so forth. And so as we all lose our grip on reality, objective reality, and not, before it was like my facts versus your facts, and now it's this third thing of completely made up. There's just no universe in which any of this is true facts, but that are convincing. What'll ultimately happen, what this is all gonna redound to, is probably, as it is, nobody basically trusts anything. There are two types of people: people who trust nothing they see anymore, nothing they hear anymore, nothing any institution tells them, and then people who trust literally everything that they get, or they trust everything they get so long as it wasn't from a classical institution or an authority figure, right? This is just going to supercharge that. And that seems pretty bad. But you know what? Hate the player. Wait, no. Don't hate the player, hate the game. Yeah. Some people are making $5,000 a month with the TikTok partner program, just creating sloppy ass videos. And that's all right with me. Appreciate the hustle. Reuters, speaking about legacy media, has a story out that Stellantis, which still to me sounds like a blood pressure medication. Stellantis, which is a car company that owns a smattering of vehicles, Chrysler, Fiat, Jeep, I guess. They have the headline from Reuters: Stellantis shelves Level 3 driver assistance program as it downscales software ambitions, sources say. And you dig in here, Level 3, for those not familiar, is basically the car drives itself. Car drives itself, and it's okay to not be supervising it every second. It's not totally soup to nuts. Like, it needs to still be able to, in the case of an emergency, I think, call out to you. I should probably double check that. I'm typing into my computer, which is something I try not to do on this program. And one reason I don't do it is I just typed into ChatGPT, what is level 3 driving? Level 3 refers to conditional automation. The car can handle all aspects of driving in certain condition. Driver, yes, so it's what I thought. Driver is not required to continuously supervise. So right now, the Tesla full self-driving is supervised, meaning it is not quite level 3 yet. They claim that they're going to get there by the end of the year. I am skeptical. Stellantis has not yet rolled out its level 3 driver assistance program. They did do an unveil in February, and the quote from the article, and this is just kind of amazing. What was unveiled in February 2025 was L3 technology for which there is currently limited market demand, so this has not been launched. But the technology is available and ready to be deployed, a Stellantis spokesperson said. I call bullshit. It's true that there's limited market demand because none of these things really fucking work totally yet. It's true that there's limited market demand because people aren't aware. Even people who've tried Tesla's full self-driving in the past and had it be shitty, it's pretty good now. I would love one that's even better, and especially one that wasn't, necessarily such a fly-by-night operation as Tesla, especially one with better sensors. There should be competition here. Not a lot of people have touched the flame yet. It's sort of like saying oh, we are going to release the iPhone. It's all done. It's a great product, but there's just not enough demand for smartphones because everyone because the market is too small because people don't know about it. One suspects that this is an excuse made up by PR to say, oh no, it's totally 100% done. It's actually perfect. It's really, really great, but we're just not enough people want it. And so we're going to shelve it. I call bullshit. I think that you probably ran into a lot of technology issues and realized that the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, because in getting to that unsupervised driver state, it's just like software. The first 90% of the project takes 90% of the time, and then the last 10% of the project takes the other 90% of the time. That last mile is way, way, way fucking harder, and that's why you need people to be able to take over and have to pay attention the whole time. So we'll see where it goes. There's Mercedes-Benz has approval to test its drive pilot thing that's like level 3. Honda's got, one that they've, it's sort of like Stellantis, where they've got an in-house thing that is supposedly level 3, but it's never actually shipped on anything. Level 2, I think we're going to be stuck in level 2 land, which is Tesla and GM's stuff for a long time. But yeah, I don't know. It's a fun area to watch. The right thing to do is generally to not be too confident in predictions about the future. But I think a certain amount of skepticism is warranted. It seems like in the post-ChatGPT era and in the heady days of everyone predicting, AGI is around the corner, self-driving cars are around the corner, like computer's going to do everything. What we keep seeing is diminishing returns, and we keep seeing is just like, it's so almost there. It's very almost there. And it might be almost there for the rest of our natural born lives. And it might never really get over the fence. It might, but I'm increasingly open to the idea that it might just never get over the fence. But that's not enough to stop Mark Benioff, the CEO, founder of Salesforce, from going on a show. He went on the Logan Bartlett show, which is, I think, a YouTube production, which I think at the time of this recording only had a few thousand views, but that was enough for local news in San Francisco to KRON4. Do they call it Cron 4? So if I go and work at that news studio to be the weatherman, is it a cron job? I guess. They wrote up a story about his appearance on the Logan Bartlett show because he had some spicy fucking shit to say. So Mark Benioff has always kind of been a authentic speaker like myself, and not necessarily incredibly press savvy in terms of the language he chooses to use. If I was the CEO of a company that big, I would probably avoid talking to the press at all. But he's bragging that he was able to cut 4,000 jobs because of AI, that enabled him to rebalance his headcount in the customer support division. He said, direct quote, "I've reduced it from 9,000 head, just that's it, 9,000 head, to about 5,000 because I need less heads." I'm going to go out there. I'm not one to say the word dehumanizing very often, but if you refer to your employees the way that a rancher would refer to cattle, that might be a bad look. Especially if what the thing the rancher's saying is like, yeah, I just killed 4,000 heads. I got rid of them. I'm down to 5,000 head, and it's really great because I didn't like those other 4,000 head. Benioff called the first 8 months of 2025, during which an estimated 10,000 jobs have been lost to AI, 8 of the most exciting months of my career. I mean, either he's sadistic or it's just tone deafness. I don't know. I think it's a damn shame when people lose their jobs to any kind of innovation. It may be completely necessary from a competitive perspective, but one's getting the sense here that he's not like super duper concerned about making sure these folks are set up for success or have really generous severance packages moving forward, or getting retrained and moved to other departments. One gets the sense. Another quote, "There were more than 100 million leads that we have not called back at Salesforce in the last 26 years because we have not had enough people. We just couldn't call them back. But now we have an agentic sales that is calling back every person that contacts us. So lead in this sense, this is like Salesforce being a sales organization. Salesforce sells what are called CRM tools and related customer relationship management. So like for tracking and tracking the sales process for whatever it is you're selling. Lots of organizations use Salesforce. Apparently Salesforce thinks of themselves as like a sales organization in the same way as their own product, which is fine. You dog food your product. You're a sales org and you sell sales software, and you probably dog food. You probably use that sales software as well as that terminology to describe how you work. That's totally fine. So a lead is like, usually it's somebody that the company has identified as a potential target. There's different nomenclature you might use. You might call that a prospect or whatever. Oftentimes in the software product world, we talk about leads as anyone who raises a hand and like maybe fills out their email address, fills out a form, contacts an email address, makes a phone call, anything that like they do to raise a hand and say, hey, I want to talk to you about your service. Book a demo, click a consultation link, sign up for a waiting list. All of those go into a system, and then that contact information becomes a lead and is merged with some sort of potential customer identity. And then it's the job of the inside sales force to inside sales will call the person, schedule the demo, pitch the thing, offer a deal, get in a contract, go through whatever your flow chart looks like for your sales process, and then that's how a customer is born. So yeah, that's what a lead is in this context. There were more than 100 million leads that we have not called back at Salesforce. There are like 360 million people in the United States. Salesforce as a product is like, it is a tool. Let's say every company on the planet needs 2 CRM tools because one is not enough, even though they should really only have one. There are not 100 million companies in the world. There are not 50 million companies in the world. So like these leads however he got that number, it can't possibly mean what he is suggesting it means. It's not like 100 million potential customers out there. It's maybe multiple people from the same company, sure. It's probably a lot of junk, okay. But it's just like it is an order, 2 orders of magnitude at least more than is meaningful to a company like Salesforce. And so like, yeah, that they didn't call them is fine. And sure, it was over 26 years. But if you have an agentic Salesforce calling back every single lead now, and it's just like a robot talking to you, just because you can doesn't mean it's going to close deals. Like what I want to know is, how does it feel for those customers? Like how often do you actually convert a lead into a customer when their callback is a bullshit AI generated email or phone call? And what does it do when you get asked really weird questions? Like Taco Bell, I don't have the link here, but like Taco Bell is unwinding its recent AI ordering experiment because at drive-thru people were asking it to do ridiculous things like give me 10,000 cups of water. Stuff that wasn't anticipated. Like, could I trick a agentic inside salesperson to kind of give me a super sweetheart deal? Like, oh yeah, could you give me 4,000% off? And maybe it's programmed to like, it can give up to, half of whatever the customer asks for in a concession. So it's like, yes, I can give you 2,000% off. And now you're suddenly getting paid to use Salesforce. Like, I don't know, man. Like, I'm sure that there's like boundary boxes around this, but I'm not so sure that it's going to necessarily mean just because you're calling everyone back with something, it's better. This is something that Test Double, like we struggled with a lot, is we'd hire sales reps and tell them, hey, go and find prospects or work through this list and contact people. And then they'd contact them, and these are humans contacting them. But because they didn't show up credibly as practitioners who understood software, as well as like our highly technical,
base of clients or ideal customer profile, a lot of those people would get the call and be like, you don't know anything about this. Why would I hire you? Right? You're just a sales guy. And that's a human sales guy. If you just get some agentic bullshit, then again, the same people who are probably these leads, who are probably just the middle managers who want to buy a CRM, are probably also the ones scrolling through a bunch of AI generated videos and they don't know any better. So who's to say? But yeah, that's the world we live in. Congratulations, everyone. Let's talk about TV. Smattering of stuff you might want to check out. If you're familiar with the YouTube channel Weird History, they've done this series of probably the most successful videos they've done are called Timeline, where they go through like an entire year of history from January to December. Here's all of the major events in 1983 and January 15th. This happened and so forth. Then they did a whole nother. They ran out of decades, and they did the whole thing with just for TV shows. What happened in TV this year? Somebody, a different channel, decided to ape their format. I don't know if they got permission or not to do like Timeline Japan, and they're doing the 80s. And so the first inaugural episode is like Timeline Japan 1980. And the amount of footage that they got and the stories that they had to tell were really actually pretty impressive for having been created by like a Westerner, like from a Western perspective, view of Japan. So if you're into Japanese, what they call the boom years of the decade where it was line only goes up, the whole world was afraid that we were going to be subservient somehow economically to Japan, despite their lack of resources and how small the country was. I think they 80 and 81 are out, and I've seen the 1981. I'll link to that. Very good, surprisingly well produced. So if you are interested in that story and the archival footage as well as like some of the just happenings going on, because if you go to Japan today, most of the things you're going to be looking at are things that were built in the 1980s. And so if nothing else, it kind of contextualizes current Japan, because so much of their culture, their pop culture, especially like how like format of television shows and variety and stuff is still very much informed by the end of the Showa era. And yeah, I don't know. It's pretty cool. Also taking place in Japan, the film Perfect Days, which you may have heard of as being an independent film that tracked the story of a guy who cleans public toilets in Tokyo. That's what literally happens. That is the plot of the movie. It is a good movie. It is not a boring movie about a guy cleaning toilets. It is a quite actually compelling film about a person who doesn't speak very much, who lives alone. He's got shit in his past, like we all do. He's got good days and bad days, but he extracts, and you can kind of see it in just sort of how he lives, almost like this ideology of he observes and experiences the good and the bad in the world and seems to only usually let the good seep in and lets a lot of the bad bounce off, but is still like an emotionally complex character who does feel bad things and then but bounces back. And it happens all kind of through osmosis. You observe this in the character and how he reacts to the different experiences that he has. So I don't have to tell any of the stories of like stuff that happens in the movie because it's besides the point, and it wouldn't be conveyed very clearly anyway through me just explaining the plot, because it's less about the plot and it's more like here is a chance to see a life lived a very different way. And we might traditionally, if we were just having it told at us, see it packaged up as like, and here's why Zen Buddhism is good, or Taoism, or here's this like Eastern approach to life, and we dress it up with all of this complexity. and all this formalism and all these, appeals to some sort of ancient wisdom and Orientalism and that sort of exotic bullshit or religiosity. And it's almost as if the filmmaker, it was a Western filmmaker, I forget their name. I was trying to verbalize it and then I couldn't. There's a W in there somewhere. That should help. Instead, it's almost as if that to make the point, it's like, no, this is a guy who cleans toilets and he's a lot happier than you fucking idiots. Like, her words, their words, his words. I don't know. Whoever made the movie. Good movie. Another movie coming out soon, next couple months here. Brendan Fraser is back. Looking marginally healthier than he did in The Whale. Still kind of worry about that guy. I hope he's okay. It's called Rental Family. And it's about a one of these services in Japan, which you may have heard of you can pay money and somebody will fill a social need for you for a time limited basis. You could, you may have heard of like rent a old man service, and he'll like spend the day with you or go fishing with you or, go shopping with you or renegotiate a salary for you. Like all these sorts of things, go to a family function as your boyfriend, whatever it is. And it's one of those services, and they just need a dumb idiot white man. And so they hire him, and he's like a kind of, he's a commercial actor who's struggling to find work. And so he winds up in this business. It looks interesting. It actually looks pretty good. I share that trailer with you because it's the closest I've gotten to like Lost in Translation vibes since that film. I guess its trailer probably came out in 2002. And that movie, just like Shenmue, had a really big impact on me. So it is a Japan pop culture heavy episode, I guess. But it'll be interesting to see how this one does. Given how well The Whale did and how much I think everyone in the industry is rooting for Brendan Fraser at all times, I think this will probably get some traction. And he's just a likable actor too, and it's a very fish out of water. With one imagines he's gonna get along with the family really well and become a real member of the family, and then the financial aspect and the contractual bits are gonna get in the way of some genuine connection. I don't want to spoil it for myself, but one suspects that's probably where it's going. If that's too feel good for you, Black Mirror season 7 dropped a while ago on Netflix. We're just now getting around to watching it. It's still really good. It's dark as fuck. You feel kind of empty and hollow and sad after watching an episode of Black Mirror. It's usually not advisable to shotgun 2 episodes or more in a single setting. I don't know that I could take that. But it is really the modern day Twilight Zone. Now that it's had a long enough run, it is some of the most creative writing and explorations of capitalism, technology, politics, and the human condition, all melded into one. Just like the Twilight Zone was a function of those things and its particular era, Black Mirror, Charlie Brooker, who writes pretty much every single fucking one of these episodes somehow, I don't know what's going on in his brain. Like, it's just unbelievable. Some of it is a little bit formulaic. There are certain themes and certain plot devices that he comes back to. There's a certain predictability. Like, there's a very obvious Chekhov's gun to almost every episode. Like, you see in one episode, you see like, oh, there's like she's a teacher, and like there's because each episode takes place in a different sort of universe, an alternate timeline, or a near future dystopia. There's a teacher in the front of the classroom, and you see a bee, and she's talking about how bees pollinate, and then you realize, oh, the bees are all mechanical now, and they're radio controlled to pollinate the flowers. And so as soon as you see that, if you've seen a bunch of Black Mirror episodes, you're like, okay, so the basic episode is going to be something about radio controlled brains, right? Or control of probably people. And then sure enough, it goes down that route. Sorry to spoil that. It's still a good episode. Yeah, Black Mirror season 7, great stuff. I think that might be the end of the run. I think I heard somewhere. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, I every now and then there's actually something worth watching on Netflix. So we re-up Netflix for a month to knock out a few things, and that's one of them. And we're having a good time. Uh, in the category of recommendations of things that you put in your mouth, these Yum Teen gummy bears that I ordered, they're gummy bears, but they've got like pretty good plant-based protein in them. It's like 110 calories a bag. It's like, I don't know how much protein, but like more than you'd expect, and won't make you shit your pants. All good facts. See, it's 110 calories, 15 grams of protein. It's pretty good. I don't know. I like them. They're all right. Are they as good as normal gummy bears? Abso-fucking-lutely not. Is it on the spectrum of, are you a protein supplement? You know, like a vitamin gummy, or are you a candy to be enjoyed? On that spectrum, it is smack in the middle. But if you're trying to get more protein and you like giving shady companies on the internet money to ship you food, at least there's a USDA looking nutrition label on the back. That's a good sign, right? Oh, and my voice is getting all froggy, so I'm gonna go hit this button to play the mailbag tune, and then I'm just gonna hack up a lung. I'm gonna hack it up, and then we'll cover some mailbag, and we'll call it a day.
You've got mail.
Almost done coughing. I'll just save that last cough for the outro music. Spencer writes in, since you don't consume social media, what do you do with those idle minutes when you're standing in line at the bank or whatever? RSS feed, news, put your phone away and feel your feelings. Spencer continues, I want to stop using social media to fill this time in my life, but I'm struggling with what to replace it with. I've tried a few different limits, and they stick for a while, but I eventually relax them and go right back to the old habits. I know you've eliminated them yourself, so hopefully you have some advice. If it's RSS, can you share your subscription list? I hadn't thought about sharing my subscription list, but I had considered when I talked about blog comments, having like a blog roll on the side of my page of recommended feeds. And that, maybe I will do something like that, come to think of it. Maybe I'll prioritize that sooner than later, because I think it might be helpful. So yes, I do have Net Newswire, which is an open source RSS client for Apple's platforms. It didn't used to have this, but it does now, has iCloud sync. So the first, when you first get the app, the experience is, here's 20 feeds you don't want, and they're all locally synced on the device. You have to like disable the on my iPhone account and then enable iCloud sync, and then start adding feeds to the iCloud account. And then all of your devices will sync up all of the RSS feeds. There's no subscription as a result. It's an open source tool, so it's a free application. That would be my strong recommendation, unless you've got some non-Apple products in your life that you want to read on. I do read RSS. I don't follow publications, like I mentioned earlier. The reason I don't follow publications is it's very, very easy to get overwhelmed quickly with, like, let's say you follow Apple news, and so you got 9 to 5 Mac and Mac Rumors and The Verge and 512 Pixels and Daring Fireball and 6 Colors. You got all these different feeds. You're going to end up going through way more articles per day than you can keep up with without it becoming its own problem and its own time sink. Additionally, you're going to end up reading the same article from 7 different sources, as they all kind of just reference each other, because there's, one paid Bloomberg newsletter by Mark Gurman is actually the thing that's provoking all of them to write, and you don't want to pay for the Bloomberg subscription, so you don't have that in your feed. So in general, I try to only subscribe to individual bloggers, because that's the thing that I'm looking for right now. I want to see more clear thinkers with interesting perspectives and experiences who have something to contribute. Right now, that's a lot of technologists. In the past, I have not typically engaged with or consumed very much technology, like programming related content. When it's your job, it's almost kind of weird to also make it, and it's your hobby to also make it like your main source of entertainment. It just seemed like a little bit too much for me, and so I would like to find more bloggers that are in the gaming space, or in. I try not to follow too much political stuff because I get wrapped up in it. The stakes are just too high seeming right now, and I get enough of that through just sort of the background radiation of our crumbling existence, to go and seek it out. But yeah, that's pretty much what I do. I stay away from the Apple News app because that can also just be like a very unsatisfying social media experience where you kind of go and scroll through all the stories and you never feel good after. Like, none of the stories are really that great. Even with News Plus and the magazine articles and stuff, like the way that the information architecture for that application is imitating a headline system, like a newspaper experience. And that's just, it turns out that was also kind of unsatisfying. Like, just not, it doesn't scratch the itch. Maybe it's that like, I really do want an inbox and I want to be able to clear it, and having just an infinite scroll of any kind isn't what I want. But the news app feels like it's just a very compromised experience. It's neither satisfying, because it's not completable, nor is it engaging. A lot of the articles are just like People magazine kind of fluff and celebrity speculation, and no matter how much you downrank them, you just get more and more kind of crap. I don't stand in line at the bank. I have not been to a bank in a long ass time. I try, pretty much all my online banking is online. When I'm by myself, I listen to podcasts. I tend not to have my phone out staring at my phone. If I'm, being totally honest, the time restrictor stuff, trying to set screen time on myself, trying to set up apps that like prevent access from myself to certain things, those never really stuck with me either. They're good in a pinch, like if I'm on vacation or something, and or in an exceptional period of time where I want to make the most of an opportunity or of an experience, they can be handy as reminders, like, snap out of it, you dummy, it's Christmas, spend time with your family, like, look up. But they don't instill in me long-term behavior change. So I would probably say the best thing anyone can do is practice boredom. Intentionally just sit with your feelings and do nothing. And, wake up in the morning, take a shower, don't put an earbud in, don't listen to anything, just exist in silence. Empty the dishes, just in silence. I realize if you might be doing these things now listening to this, and I'm glad you're listening to this because it makes me feel less alone. And it's sometimes necessary and helpful to drown out the voices in our head. But I think in general, the opposite of engagement is not disengagement, right? When you're not engaging with other content and consuming media, the brain has a long practiced track record of doing other useful shit and thinking of stuff and thinking of creative ideas. And so sometimes it's as simple as I'll be emptying the dishes on a break, and as long as I'm careful to not like also, be consuming somebody else's content that like mutes that creative impulse, my brain will just solve problems or think of creative ideas or think of a funny pun or connections will get made. And anything that we're doing while we've got downtime that will interrupt our brain's ability to think is unfortunate. Something is lost, right? So when I say practice boredom, it doesn't mean, it's not like suffering for the sake of suffering. It's not exposure therapy to some, worse state. It's practice boredom, see what happens. Maybe creative thinking will occur. Maybe you'll connect dots between things. Maybe you'll get inspiration to go and do something else. And in so doing, you will, just like social media can be engaging and addictive because it gets you a little tiny bit of dopamine or a funny meme or whatever, boredom can become addictive. it's like sometimes I'm like, you know what I really need is I need a walk with no fucking devices because I look forward to thinking something creative. I'll raw dog my run sometimes. I never used to do this, but like I'll go on a run. I'll do my 5K, run outside, just thinking my thoughts. No earbuds in. It's real weird. Yeah. And in general, whenever I'm just standing around, when other people would be staring at their phone, I'm very often just standing and looking like a pedophile because people don't do that anymore. Nick writes in response to our interview with Scott Werner last week, Justin, this was a great show. I'm still thinking about that long pause that you didn't edit out. There was a moment where I put him on the spot about something like what jobs are going to get disrupted by AI or something like that. And Scott did not immediately answer. And I think we talked about it before the show that this is not the kind of show where I have an editor who's going to edit out the pauses. And so there was a long enough pause. I'm like, I'm not editing this. This is staying in the audio. You can talk or not. We can just have a little quiet time. He did eventually respond. Maybe not to everyone's satisfaction, but, Becky and my brother talked about it afterwards. They were like, you know what, like, we like the pauses. It's unusual. You're not afraid of the dead air that a lot of other shows, most shows are terrified of and do everything they can to collapse to kind of keep things tight. But at the same time, sometimes the pauses are so long, I think my AirPods just died. And that's a little bonus. That's just to keep you on your toes. Nick continues, I'm definitely on the early adopter side of things, and while I like it so far, he's presumably talking about AI, I wonder if I will when it's less of a tinkerer's paradise while we figure this out. That's a good question. And we talked a little bit about this in the interview, but like AI right now is like pretty much like, especially for code generation stuff, it's the domain of early adopters. We're experimenting with it. We're having a lot of fun. We're getting mostly good outcomes. In a lot of technologies, the early adopters have a great time because other people haven't stepped in to ruin it yet. It's not on it's on people's job descriptions, but like, I think a lot of the people who are creating content and engaged by this stuff are using it out of an earnestness, a desire to try new things, to do things better, to push the envelope a little bit. And as it becomes a more rote activity, if you could only imagine like, oh, we practice the Spotify LLM, model, and we all use it exactly this way. And that means that we have it go through these gated criteria. And maybe there's sort of like there was with Agile, like, oh, we're going to have a certification process for what kind of shop are you? Like these engineering organizations are, we do all of our agentic coding using this system, whether that's a technical system or a workflow. And once it becomes a mechanical and rote, you also rob people of the autonomy and that tinkerer's paradise that Nick puts. That's a great point. I try not to think about that, but if things can get worse and mechanistic, they often will. So enjoy this while it's new. Bjorn writes in, hi, Justin. I listened to version 42 a couple days ago. Thanks. I found it much of it interesting. I'm sure I will listen to future episodes. I'm in that non-zero number of people you mentioned, finding my way to your podcast after coming across your article on full breadth developers. Thanks for that article too. Put many things I've been pondering into cohesive words. That was just the pretext, but because there was a compliment in there, I figured I'd read it. Now to the point. In version 42, you talked about chores and some men's lack of doing them. As a man who reflects a lot about relationships and fairness, I appreciate you bringing up the subject. I live in Sweden, where basically everyone, at least in public, agrees that individuals should do their part in a household. But I also recognize that it's not always easy to consistently get it done. It requires planning and communication, and regardless of good intentions from all involved, it's still hard. Well, I'm a software developer, so after thinking carefully about these issues in my own relationships, a few years back I created a web app called Equaliteam. Equaliteam. equaliteam.com. Here's how it works. Whenever you notice some chore that needs doing, you activate the corresponding task in Equaliteam. Equaliteam will assign the task It sounds like a very corporate portmanteau. I'm not making fun of it, Bjorn. The quality team will assign the task among the team members following an algorithm that strives for fairness over time. If the task was assigned to yourself, you do it and mark it completed. If it was assigned to somebody else, it'll pop up on their to-do list and you can just leave it at that. Task recurrence can be set manually, or you can let it automatically predict the interval based on your recent history, which works surprisingly well for simple deterministic functions. Interesting. He goes on with some more detail. So I'll put a link out to Equaliteam with the show notes if you want to check it out. That's a cool idea. And it's, one of the scariest kinds of apps to write and most tempting are like to-do list and to-do list adjacent because they're never done. They could an infinite number of things you could add to them, and everyone's got their own like way of doing it, and everyone thinks they're an expert. So I logged in and I poked around. I didn't pay for a subscription or go any further, but it seemed pretty solid. I will say that whenever I'm in the Nordic, I am reminded that like men are pieces of shit in most countries, and then in the Nordic, you go like to Norway and it's like see baby strollers everywhere, and it's mostly men pushing them on their own. Yeah, I don't know. Jason writes in. After your discussion on premiere TV content beating most movies these days, I realize I'm kind of shocked that theater chains such as AMC have left themselves dependent on content whose quality they don't influence. Maybe AMC has some big funding and studios, but surely the next tier down of theater chains doesn't, and they're wholly dependent on selling content whose quality is dwindling. Seems interesting. This got me thinking about, up until recently, the consent decree. So the Paramount consent decree ran from like 1948, where a single company could not produce, distribute, and exhibit films. There's a loud sound outside. If you can hear that, it's probably a garbage truck. It's very squeaky. Sorry. So anyway, yeah, the Paramount, if you're a movie studio, you can't also exhibit the film and distribute the film and also exhibit the film. So typically what that meant was theaters were independently owned from the studios, and a single theater wouldn't be like, this is a Disney theater that only plays Disney films. It created marketplace competition. So that, my entire life, probably your entire life, was the law of the land until 2020, when that went away. And so now that has opened the door to, and this is one reason why in 2020, 2021, 2022, we started to see things like AMC, for example, has produced their own content. They did the Taylor Swift concert edition where, they blew the pants off the studio stuff that month. It was like Flowers of Killer Moon, the Apple one, got like, I was in the movie theater watching that film, and on either side of me were packed, Taylor Swift concert movies. And so like it was loud. Yeah, I don't know. I think that it would make sense for the movie studios, the theater owners or theater chains to probably, like merge with, be acquired by streamers or studios. That might make some kind of sense. It's just a shitty business to be in. There's a reason that AMC is also a meme stock, right? Like it's the fixed operating expenses are super fucking high. The staff, the utilities, the upkeep, the of course the large real estate investments that are required to have a theater. Marginal ticket prices are really high. We're entering probably a recession if we're not already in one. Like it's a rough business to even be in. Like that is operating on razor thin margins. The popcorn I make at home is better. The image fidelity on my home projector is better than the AMC theater at Disney Springs. It's a hard value proposition at this point to make. I don't know what happens to theaters, but I don't think the solution is going to be like that theaters find some secret pile of money to also make content that's good enough to get people to come back. Movies are going to, there will be a few hits a year. And as long as there are theaters, they'll play those hits. But it's Yeah, I don't I don't know anyone today who'd like wake up and think like this is a business I want to get in. Uh, we'll see how it plays out. I suspect a slow and inevitable decline is the most likely. Andrew writes in with miscellaneous version 42 stuff. He says, I'm happy you sorted out your dishwasher situation, but for your next dishwasher, you got to check out the Miele dishwashers. This was one that I looked at. Miele. They're fancy. They open themselves at the end of the cycle so that your dishes dry faster, and more importantly, they aren't burning your hands. I've never had my hands burnt by a dishwasher, except for the one time I touched the little metal coil at the bottom. Don't do that when it's running. It's so cool, and I love mine. Sorry about the balcony, though. That really sucks, man. Yeah, I'd forgotten about the balcony. The balcony is not yet under construction because I'm on some number of months of a waiting list. So I guess like one day, just some burly men are going to come and knock down the back of my house, and I'm going to learn about that. But yeah, new dishwasher is fine. It's 3 racks, but it's the same height, which means that it fits less tall shit, which is probably the only complaint I have. But otherwise, it's pretty good. Betas. He also writes, I have no complaints about the iOS betas, like battery performance, minor glitches notwithstanding, but what the fuck is going on with AirPods? Since I put my phone on the beta, my audio is glitching constantly and it's driving me nuts. It's worse when going for runs, so at first I thought it was somehow wind related, but it's also happening indoors, just sitting at my desk, so who fucking knows? I've had a handful of AirPods related issues. My advice is like, the further you are away, let's think of it this way. Where are we most likely to have genetic defects like emerge over the course of our life? It's the areas that are furthest from the heart. That's why, you get pervasive ingrown toenails and shit, or deformities in hands and feet because they are far away from the heart. The blood flow is the most, least generous, most inconsistent. So I've been told. If you are at the extremity of the iPhone sphere of influence, you got an iPhone in your pocket. Like, for example, your Apple Watch is pretty much useless without the iPhone. You need an iPhone to set one up. It needs a connection to one on a regular basis for a lot of core functionality. If the iPhone, even if you have a backup, if you reset an Apple Watch and you don't restore your backup, pretty much everything within a day or two of fucking around with a handful of settings, it's going to feel exactly the same as the Apple Watch did, right? So the cost as you get further from the iPhone of doing a hard blown reset of the thing goes down because the iPhone kind of defines the experience. The AirPods are the same way. If you do a factory reset on a set of AirPods, yeah, like what the left stem and the right stem do when you click them, or maybe what the shortcuts are for the different transparency and audio modes, like that needs to be reset. But other than a handful of settings, my advice is whenever an Apple Watch is acting up, just do a hard reset. What's it going to cost you other than like an hour or two of annoyance over the course of the next couple of weeks? Not even that much, right? Like in terms of setting things up again. AirPods, 5-10 minutes of setup and you're basically back to where you were. So I pretty aggressively unpair my AirPods from my iCloud account, hold down that button for a long time, and then I actually just did it a few weeks ago. So that would be my advice, especially during beta season. As well as this was maybe the first beta season where when you're in the AirPod settings, you can actually explicitly opt into the betas from the AirPod setting menu. Previous generations of iOS, if you were on the iOS beta and you would pair your phone with them, you would just automatically get upgraded your AirPods firmware to the beta. And that would cause issues if you were also using it with non-beta OS stuff. So anyway, let's end there. A week from now, there's going to be new phone announcements. Probably so predictable it wouldn't be worth an emergency podcast to talk about these extremely predictable events. But we'll see. A couple of weeks from now, I've got another hot fix scheduled. Should be a fun conversation. Hopefully that goes through. Hopefully that goes well. And don't let the slop hit you where the good Lord split you.